V Ken and I planned our chat together for a few weeks now, and we keep missing opportunities because he's traveling and I'm traveling for my workcation, my annual trip from Montana to Jackson, Wyoming, and through the Tetons and Yellowstone. So we finally got a chance to sit down, and so I'm in the hotel lobby, the Cloudville in Jackson Hole. So you can hear people kind of coming in and out of the lobby area, and some people actually started to sit next to me, so you could probably hear some chatter in the background. But without further ado, here is the episode with V Ken, and he's talking about his creator-owned book, Battle Chronicle Sol-Stryker.
Ask you about your book. You're getting it kickstarted. It's happening now, right? So it's going to end in in a week or so.
Yeah, it's ending June 1st at 7:40 a.m. Eastern time. So it's
Are you scared?
Are
you nervous?
Yeah. Nervous, scared, all of it. Yeah, this is my first time doing a creator-owned book, where I'm the creator, and driving the ship myself and doing the art and like all of it, So it's definitely been a huge learning experience. I know you've done a lot of it yourself, so I know you're probably.
I haven't actually. I have not kickstarted my own personal book yet. I've worked with other people on their Kickstarters, but I've never taken the ship and steered it on my own yet. And so this is kind of a self-serving interview because I need to pick your brain about this stuff so that I don't stumble, or very little. So before the Kickstarter started, like right before you launched it, tell me the pre-planning, the prep, like how much time it took for you to before, from the time that you conceived the idea to the time that you had it on Kickstarter ready to go. How long did that take you?
Oh, wow. So I first came up with the idea way back in like 2010. The first original idea I had was like basically like a superhero that fights monsters like vampires, werewolves, stuff like that, right? And the idea was like a superhero that has like a sword made of sunlight and it gets passed down through generations, and it's kind of like the Phantom or something like that, right? And I remember I pitched Peter Steigerwald this at Comic-Con like back in 2015, and he was like just kind of like he was like, well, what about this? What about that? And like just kind of like poking holes in like the whole idea. And I was like, oh, maybe it's not that good of an idea. I don't know. So,
or it's not ready yet.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like around 2019. I got back into video games. Like I hadn't played them in like forever. And there was a new Final Fantasy game that came out. It was Final Fantasy 15. And I was like I loved 7, 8, and 9 and 10 when I was like a kid. And so I was like, oh, there's a new Final Fantasy. I'm gonna check this out. And it just kind of like opened my mind kind of. And like at the same time, I was like rediscovering all the anime I liked when I was a kid too, like Dragon Ball Z and Gundam Wing. I just started like rewatching it all. So like all this stuff that I loved when I was like 14, I just started re-experiencing it all at once. And I was like, and like my initial idea, I always had this idea of like this character in the back of my head that had like a sun sword. And I was like, man, like I really like these oversized swords and these characters. And like, I like this idea of like a team and like an RPG style kind of idea, where there's like not just one character, there's a bunch of characters, and they're all diverse and they'll have their own unique like thing that they do and like their personality. And my writing partner on this was my friend Jason Matthews, and he was the one helping me develop the superhero idea. And I called him up and I was like, hey dude, like what if we do like a fantasy book? Like take this like concept of like a superhero fighting monsters, but like blow it out into being like an RPG, like our version of a Final Fantasy or like a Zelda or something like of that ilk. And he was a really big Lord of the Rings fan and like Dungeons and Dragons fan, so that was like right up his alley as well. So yeah, it just kind of snowballed out from there in 2019, and like we've just been working on a little bit here and there ever since. And then this past year is when I really kind of hunkered, because we had the story down, we kind of mapped everything out, and like this past year is when I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like hunker down the art, and like this is when we just kind of pushed forward. And this past year I've been working on it, and yeah, now we finally brought it out and super pumped about it.
That is so cool to hear that. I think my story, Neo Wonderland, is kind of the same thing, where you take everything that you love and you mix it up, and then you find your own voice within all those inspirations. And I think it's when you get comfortable with your own style, maybe, and then working the industry long enough where you actually decide that it's time for you to take the reins, right? And a lot of it is always like a mixture of everything that inspired us. It's never something that's so obscure and uninspiring, by the things that we've grown to love. Because I love Final Fantasy and I love RPGs and open world games like Fallout, obviously, and Red Dead Redemption. And so that's kind of how Lola came about. And now this new one, it's like inspired by a lot of the anime I used to watch and the more RPGs and stuff like that too. So it's kind of cool.
Which ones do you like? What are your favorites? Of like
For
the
which
animes
ones?
and RPGs. For like the
Oh,
animes.
okay. Well, this is gonna date me a little bit, but if you watch Dragon Ball, it dates everybody, right? It would have to be like Ranma 1.5, and I love Ninja
My
Scroll.
wife loves that. I'm very
Uh,
familiar with both those shows. Yeah.
it's so cute and inappropriate. And I love there's parts, and Ninja Scroll, of course, right? And uh, Rurouni Kenshin or Samurai X, that was huge. When my
Mm-hmm.
brother and I we watched that, and then of course Naruto was like kind of when I was already an adult, but that was so addicting. We like binge watched those scenes where they were just standing there talking and thinking in their head before they even made one,
Yeah.
move. Yeah, but I loved it. It made me go into my head a little bit more about like my actions, I guess, before I decided to make a move. So
Yeah.
those are the ones I
Did
can
you
think of. And Ghost in the Shell, of course, right? Yeah.
did you ever watch Vision of Escaflowne? It was like
I don't think so, but I mean, I've heard of it, of
okay,
course.
it
Yeah.
was of that era, but yeah, it was very much like in that vein of everything you're talking about. And that was like another huge like inspiration. Like one of those things when I was a kid where I was like, oh yeah, this is like so cool. And like just recently
Where
watching
did
it.
you watch your anime? Like, where did you get it from? Did you rent it? Did you buy it? Was it on TV, or how did you? I know. I mean, you must be you're definitely younger than me. Because my friend used to have to bring videotapes that he'd record from Japan and then bring
Oh
it back, and then
wow.
that's how. And it was super blurry, and it wasn't always like the whole thing. It was
Yeah.
only parts of it, but it was so rare that it made it special. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's really cool. Like for me, it was Toonami on Cartoon Network because there was like
Oh,
because I was like 13, I was 12, 13 when that like hit, and
yeah.
like
Okay.
it was the perfect age for it. And then right around that time, then like do you remember like Coconuts and like Fye those stores? They would sell like the DVDs of like stuff that wasn't on Toonami, so like Escaflowne and like stuff like that, like
Yeah.
Evangelion. Like I remember I bought an Evangelion movie DVD back then that was like the end of the story, and like I didn't know anything about it. I just know that it was like I loved Gundam and I loved the
It
robots, and I
looked
was like,
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I remember watching. I was like so confused and like weirded out. I'm like, this isn't very good. I mean, I haven't watched it since, but like because I know it's really popular. But when I was a kid, I was just like, this is so strange. It's too weird for me. Like,
And I get it. I get it. Yeah, it's hard to
yeah,
get into some of them. It's the story is so thick, right? And the lore.
yeah,
And when you're a kid, you're like, oh, it looks cool, and the characters are neat. I love the
yeah.
intro song, so that's all I need.
Exactly,
um,
exactly. Yeah.
so, are you fulfilling the your Kickstarter yourself, or do you have like a team or a company that you're going through?
We're gonna be doing it all ourselves. We try to keep costs as low as possible, and it's still like really expensive making these books. Like our our funding goal is what it's actually costing us to make it. So that's why it's like sort of on the higher end. So we're really hoping that we're able to go and be able to make it because we've gotten really good feedback from people who've backed it so far. But yeah, I'm gonna be fulfilling it all myself. Probably gonna go up to my parents' house and turn their big because I live in an apartment, so I don't have a ton of room. And my wife's like,
I
we
know.
don't really. This is like all my space here is back here, and
Good
like
luck,
half of it is
man.
like yeah, some of her stuff too. So like yeah, so I'm gonna probably go up to my parents' house and then turn their basement into a shipping center for a couple weeks and get everything sent out from there.
I love it. I love that story. I mean, Vince told me he mailed out each copy himself. So, yeah.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
wow, that's crazy. Yeah, one of the reasons I want to do it myself too is that so many of the rewards we're having are from like we're not just doing the book, we're doing like metal covers and metal prints and t-shirts and hats and basically stuff from a bunch of different vendors, and some of the rewards are original art too. So like i'm I'm scared that like a fulfillment company would mess it up, and like not get people what they're especially the original art part of it. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like for this first one, I'm gonna see how it goes. If it's like so unattainable, like through this first time, it's just a nightmare. Maybe we'll look at something in the future for like the next one. But for right now, I'm gonna try it out and see.
Awesome. You're a pioneer, man. Between you and me, like you're just uncharted territory. Like I'm looking into that. I really am. And I just know myself well enough to know that I'm not good at certain things. So we'll see how that
Yeah,
goes.
I remember because before I jumped in this whole thing, I actually called JT Kroll about it because he had done run a Kickstarter for his book, and he was like, "Nah, it's totally cool if you're organized and you make your rewards and you basically assemble the rewards and then assign the package to the names as long as you're like organized." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll try it that way." So he made it sound like it was totally doable. So
Okay, well, if
yeah,
JT says it, it must be true, right?
yeah.
But then if not, you could come back on my podcast and tell me how that went.
Oh,
Just let me know
definitely,
your
yeah,
experience. Yeah.
yeah.
So, did you want to like tell everybody about your story and your Kickstarter, maybe like
Totally,
pitch it to
totally.
us, man?
The book is called Chronicle Sol-Stryker, and so the overall sort of elevator pitch is as war erupts across the battle-scarred land of Impera, the reluctant Princess Roxy Sakai and her Sol-Striker knights must band together to reclaim their kingdom and combat the Fomorian armies of Dracul that threaten to cast their world into eternal darkness. On their journey, they will reconcile truths from a concealed past, master mysteries of the solar key that powers their kingdom, and unite peoples of disparate nations as they fight to bring salvation to their world. So yeah, it's very, very. It's the idea of it aesthetically is blending that '90s, early 2000s comic book look with anime and like Shonen Jump and like Final Fantasy kind of stuff that I love. So kind of like blending the two together. Yeah, it takes place in a fictional world called Impera. The world, the hierarchy of the world is split into two factions. There's humans and there's these creatures of the night called Fomorians. So think like vampires, werewolves, gargoyles, like all those types are kind of under this umbrella of Fomorian creatures, and they're for all intents and purposes they're immortal. They live super long. They don't die of natural causes. They're strong, fat. They're just bigger, stronger, faster. They're monsters, literally monsters. But their one weakness is sunlight. They can't go out in the sun, and so in this world, this energy of their planet, there's two sort of keys like Ki keys that sort of give you the world its energy, the shadow key and solar key. And the kingdom of Hikari, the humans, the royal family has been able to master this solar key and sort of make it the dominant power of the world. And they've because they've been able to weaponize the solar power, they've expanded their reach basically across the whole known world. And kind of with this edge they have with the solar power, they've banished basically the Fomorians into like squalor, into like the outer like realms where there's not like really land, not a lot of fertile ground. They're kind of living like in poverty, you know. So the Fomorians have this, they're disenfranchised at this bone to pick with the Karin kingdom. So this war has been going on for centuries in this world where they've kind of at each other's throats. Like the Fomorians feel like they're very like abused by the Karens, but the Karens feel like they're like, we're protecting our people because these monsters literally eat and kill our people. So they're in this sort of conflict, and our main characters, the Soul Strikers, they're these elite soldiers for the Karin kingdom that they've got swords that are basically bonded to them and made out of solar energy that the king is able to kind of siphon off solar power and bestow it to them, and that's how they have these like weapons that are able to kill Fomorians. And so our main group of them, the war kind of comes crashing into their kingdom, and the princess who's the heir to this power and this group of rookie Soul Strikers, they're thrown into the conflict, and they kind of this first issue kind of kicks all off, but the overall story is they venture out into the world and they see that there is like a hierarchical breakdown. So it's like it's the stuff they've been told their whole lives might not actually be true, and like who's your enemy might not actually be bad, and so like and our side might not actually be totally good, but we do want to like what how do you reconcile that, and how do you basically fight a path forward to like make things better for everyone and to kind of like walk the path of like a true victory with like true peace for people, and kind of sort of bring harmony and like understanding to both sides. And that's like and like these are kind of like high like esoteric ideas, but it's all wrapped in this like very like Toonami Saturday morning cartoon, like high action, crazy visuals, like fun. Like that was the other thing, is like we wanted to be saying something important about like the nature of like peace and working together, and like
Mm-hmm.
and like you know like seeing seeing this the sameness in people and not the differences, but also just have this like kick-ass like fun book, you know.
That's really cool that you mentioned that, because I think it's too easy to paint something with a broad brushstroke or assume or make assumptions and stereotype good guys, bad guys, right? Like that's a very simplistic way
Hmm.
of looking at a story. And then I guess, like you were saying, conflict. And it's really neat that you're going to be able to hopefully, like, I don't know if you explored it on purpose, like right when you were writing the story, or if it's something that came in while you were, sorry, ahead of time. Like, oh, you know what, I want to explore this instead of making it black or white. It's going to be more gray areas on both sides. Like, was that
Hmm.
something that you thought about ahead of time, or was it as you wrote you realized that you started to empathize with maybe the supposed, like bad guys, right?
Well, yeah, it was a little bit of both because like when I first started the idea way back when, like the superhero idea, it was just good guys and bad guys. And then like when we kind of sort of looked at it as sort of this war fantasy book, like I said, I was watching like rewatching like Gundam Wing and Gundam Double O and Gundam Seed, like all those Gundam shows that I like, and that was something I noticed in those shows was that like there's the main characters are good, but the factions that they're fighting for might not necessarily be good, and like the bad guys might not necessarily be bad. And that sort of that idea I thought was like really interesting because like in war in real life, like people like both sides think they're the good ones and like the people that are fighting are the bad ones, right? Like that's kind of like the nature of conflict, right? Like what you think you're doing is right. And so transpiring that onto like a fantasy style book was something that I personally don't feel like we've seen that much of. Like in Lord of the Rings, like you don't really think the orcs are like have like this like noble streak in them or whatever, you know. So that we wanted to like in this first book it's hinted at, but like as we go forward, it's going to be a lot more of like the backstory of like the main villain is this character named Baylor, and he looks like this big dean. He's basically like the warlord of the Fomorians, who's like think Genghis Khan. Like he's this guy that's sort of like is amassing all these like tribes together under his banner, and like a lot of his backstory and what makes him tick is a lot different than most like fantasy books, and it's going to be something that I think readers are going to definitely like uh sympathize with or like empathize with, or like not necessarily agree but like understand like where he's coming from, you know.
Yeah, that's really going to be exciting. And I think the more that I write my story, my main character, I'm like, man, he's if I didn't know his backstory, he's pretty bad. So I don't know if I like him. So I'm trying to like really hash it out and go, okay, what's the final message I'm trying to put out there, and am I really exploring character, or am I just running with a story that I had written 20 years ago and just sticking to it? I mean, it's really hard to like pry yourself away from it, but I feel like I'm at
Hmm.
this phase where I want to explore the concepts like you with gray areas and gray characters would be more fascinating to me now as an adult, like living, having lived a life where you realize not everything is so cut and dry. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I think that like because like I think that's like really like interesting to me too as like a reader of this stuff is that like because in our book like our main good guys, our hero team, like our four main characters, like they are good, like they are good people, especially like our main character Varric, like he's kind of like what I want to say with like superhero characters a lot, like a lot of the stuff
Mhm.
I'm like attributing to him, and like I think the world is a tough place, right? And like but it's like how you as a person can try to be your best self, the best version of yourself, the best person you can possibly be, even when like the world's kind of like pushing you down. And like I think that is like a message that I think is like really relatable to a lot of people, you know.
Yeah, and I think especially coming from an artist writer, I think it's more cohesive when the story comes out. Whereas and I know you have a co-writer, but oftentimes when you're just drawing someone else's stories, or you're having someone else draw your stories, it's a collaborative effort. So the story is going to become like, I mean, there's different voices, right, within the story.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think that people are gravitate towards like the artist writer or vice versa, just because there is that single voice and there's no mistaking that voice, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I think everybody I've interviewed, except for maybe Vince on the podcast, is an artist writer, and the show is called Doing It All, which is literally what you're doing right now, right?
Yeah. Which is like there's so besides just the writing and the art, there's so much other stuff like the business stuff that like going into it now is like payroll and like all like just all this other like not fun stuff. And I'm like, oh man, like
Yeah, and
yeah.
then you had then I was joking with Vince. I'm like, then you had to learn to love it because you have to do it. You're like, oh, I should find something interesting about it because it's part of our job. And I think it's good. It's good training and experience for people like us, so that when we do venture back into like doing, a project or like a project that's not our own, then we have that business backing where you could basically get the wage that you deserve, and all that other stuff, and make sure that we're not scrounging around for work, which is really hard for a lot of people, I think, and especially
Oh,
kids that people, not just kids, but people who want to start out, in comics. Like the question is
yeah,
always like, can you make money in comics? It's like yes and no.
yeah,
Yes and no.
yeah.
The business side is super important though, to understand and get down. And I think Kickstarter and being able to have your own project nowadays is teaching us artists to be a lot more aware of everything that goes into making a book and the business side of comics. So yeah.
Yeah. It's weird, like, because for so long, I've just been the artist, right? And like now I find myself like this past year, like there would have been days where all I did was write or all I did was like managerial stuff, right? Like for the Kickstarter, for example, like making the graphics for everything, right? And like, and at the end of the day, I would feel like I didn't do any work today. I feel like crap because I didn't do anything. But then like I have to like reframe that method. Just because you're not drawing doesn't mean you're not actually like working. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
do you run into that issue where like you?
All the time right now. I,
Yeah,
I feel kind of have anxiety, and I'm like, man, I didn't post anything on my Instagram in a while, but like you're doing all this other back end stuff that no one really sees, and if I stopped and started to draw something, I'd have anxiety again because I'm supposed to be doing the paperwork and managerial
yeah,
stuff, right? Like, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I haven't even started my Kickstarter yet now, so I don't know.
What would you do? You know like when you're targeting like to launch? Like,
So we already planned everything out. I'm thinking it's going to be, because we're at the finish lane Mechanica. It's probably not going to be till August or September where it's actually going to be kickstarted. Like the page is going to be up and ready to go,
yeah,
but the book is being worked on, June and July, and it's going to be 32
cool.
pages. And as soon as the inks are halfway done, then I'll know that it's time to like get the mailing list going and stuff like that. Because colors are super easy. I'm getting people to flat it for me, and then lettering and the inking. That's the easy stuff. It's putting the story out there, like the pencils. You know how it is. It's like there's some
Yeah,
stages that are a little bit more. You drag your feet a lot more than others. But luckily for us, I think you ink your own stuff, right?
I do. Yeah, yeah,
So your pencils don't have to be super tight. So
yeah.
that's
But I was just looking at your Lady Mechanica issue, like where the back matter has your pencils in it, and like your pencils are insanely tight. Like I was blown away with like, oh my god, yeah. Like my pencils are so rough compared to that now. Like
this
now
is
that I'm like thinking myself, like yours are
actually.
very, very like I feel like you could color off your pencils. Like,
Oh, thank you. I don't know.
yeah,
It all depends, right? How much of a hurry I'm in.
yeah,
But you should see Joe's. Oh my God, Joe's pencils. Every time I'm looking at his references, even though they're loose, they're super tight at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. Like when
Mhm.
he starts to sketch, he has his hands everywhere. But then once he starts to find his shapes, it just refines itself down, and it's so gorgeous. And then Beth and Peter color over it, and it looks amazing. Yeah, I mean, like it's so nerve wracking to work under him because he's one of my idols. When I was growing
Oh
up, I
yeah,
wanted to be Michael Turner or Joe Benitez. Those are
yeah.
my guys. And I'd read The Darkness and Lady what is it, Magdalena. It was just that's my jam. So I've wanted to work on his book ever since I saw Lady Mechanic. I'm like, one day I want to draw this book. So yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, Joe's awesome. He's like a phenomenal artist, and like as for someone like me who was like coming into Aspen and like being like scared to like approach like like legends like him, like he was super like inviting and like cool and like just made you feel at ease. Like, yeah. I was lucky enough. He did a cover share with me, so he actually did a cover for Soul Striker. So one
I
of our
saw that
variant covers
actually.
is
Yeah.
of his, and
Oh,
it came
I'm
out
glad it
so
was.
good.
Yeah. He did my Lola cover, and it's my favorite piece. So yeah,
Yeah.
so awesome.
There was far too much background noise, so I had to cut the podcast short on top of the fact that I actually had a reservation just a couple minutes after this portion right here.
We have 8 different variant covers. I did 5 of them. There's like the first 4 A, B, C, D are like the main crew characters. Cover E is by Brett Booth, Adelsa Corona, and Andrew Dahlhaus. Cover cover F is Sue Lee. She did all herself, and cover G is Joe, and his looks awesome. And Beth colored it. It looks Chef's Kiss, so good. And then cover H is our chase variant, which is like my nod to like those Baywatch pinup covers, like the sexy like pinup covers. So that's like the chase variant that's included in like as a standard cover. You can get it in the all V KEN Marion cover pack, which is all 5 of my covers, or the all cover pack, which is all 8 covers. And then we also have metal cover versions of everything. And we have hollow foil covers of covers A, B, and H. And then we also have merch sets like t-shirts, hats, stickers, metal prints.
Do you have trading cards?
Yeah, we don't have trading cards, no. Well, actually, we have metal trading cards that are only coming with the original art tiers. So if you get a commission or I'm selling, so they're super limited. They're only going to be printed to what we get for them, and it's going to be the cover B kind of prints as a metal trading card, and that will only come with. So I've got a commission tiers of busts, then half bodies and full bodies, and then also I'm putting 3 of my covers up for sale too. So those are like way down at the bottom for like the original art collectors. They're like obviously a higher tier end reward, but those also come with the metal trading cards.
I am going to put a link to your Kickstarter on this episode, and then I'll put some of the art and stuff too. So that's awesome.
Thank
man.
you.
Well, I am very impressed, and I cannot wait to interview you again when you're done and your hair is all disheveled and it's been 2 months later. Like, I'm never doing this again. So I'm gonna do a follow up to see how you do, because I think it's inspiring for people who want to work at Marlboro DC and they haven't gotten their foot in the door yet, and there's other avenues now for them to try to at least look into it. See if they like it.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you're actually one of the biggest inspirations for me for doing this, to be honest with you. Like, because I would see all the stuff you did with like Lola and the new book you were talking about, like because the new book you did is the guy with the samurai like looking guy, right? Yeah, he looks so cool. Like, and so like like with your doing all this stuff, like that was like a big inspiration for me. Like all those years back when I was like, I really should start doing this. And like when I see you post stuff, so I mean, it is really cool. Like to talk to you about it. Like it is big inspiration for sure.
I mean, we should definitely, do a follow up and chat some more. And hopefully by then, I'll have my thing going and then I could tell you how hard it is.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed by you. And, thank you for reaching out actually and giving me an idea to talk about the Kickstarter, because I think, like I said, it's important for people to have avenues and ways to make and get their ideas out there. It's so fulfilling. I know it's hard, but it's worth it, right?
So. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Like, I really appreciate you taking the time. Like,
no, awesome, man. You're so cool, dude. So awesome. Well, I guess I'll catch you on the flip side and go check out his Kickstarter. This is going to be up right before it ends, I think. So check it out. Back him, back the artist. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
Later.